It was one of those evenings where the world felt calm, almost too calm. The kind of evening where the crickets sing, the streetlights glow just enough to make you feel safe, and the smell of fresh-cut grass hangs in the air. That peace was about to shatter. A dusty security SUV with the words HOA Patrol stenciled in bold white letters crept along the cul-de-sac like it was guarding Fort Knox. Behind the wheel sat Gary Holt, a man who'd never served a day in law enforcement but carried himself like a sheriff from an old western. His uniform wasn't even regulation, just a starched polo tucked too tight into cargo pants. But the way he puffed out his chest, you'd think the president had personally assigned him to this neighborhood. Gary thrived on one thing: control. To him, the HOA wasn't just a group of homeowners keeping lawns tidy. No, this was his kingdom. Every trash bin left out an extra hour, every mailbox flag raised too high, he noticed. And tonight, his eyes caught something he thought didn't belong. A sleek black SUV rolled slowly up the street and stopped at the end of one particular driveway. Out stepped a woman in her mid-30s, calm, collected, with that aura of confidence that comes from knowing she belonged anywhere she went. She had sharp eyes that scanned her surroundings without fear. This was Emily, the daughter of the homeowner, visiting her dad after months away. But Gary didn't know that. To Gary, she wasn't a daughter returning home. She was a suspicious intruder. He flicked on his high beams, blinding her as she reached for her bags. His SUV lurched forward and stopped hard, blocking her vehicle in. The squeak of his brakes echoed down the street like a warning shot. "Even in, ma'am," Gary barked, stepping out with a flashlight in hand. He angled the beam right in her face. "This is private property. You mind explaining what business you got here?" Emily raised an eyebrow, half amused. "What business? That's my dad's house. I'm staying the night." Gary smirked, tapping the flashlight against his palm like he was cross-examining her. "Not without ID, you're not. We've had a string of outsiders sniffing around. Can't just let anybody waltz in. HOA policy." From the front porch, the door creaked open. Emily's father, John, an old-timer with gray hair and a worn-out flannel shirt, stepped outside. "Gary, what's the meaning of this? That's my daughter." But Gary wasn't listening. He found his audience. A few neighbors poking their heads out, kids whispering from their porches, phones already recording. He loved this. Loved the spotlight, loved playing sheriff in a town that never asked for one. "Sir," Gary said, his voice rising theatrically, "until she presents identification approved by HOA standards, she ain't stepping foot past that driveway." John threw his hands up, exasperated. "Approved by who? You. This is my property." Emily couldn't help but laugh under her breath. She'd seen this before, men who thought authority was something you could fake with a badge sewn on a shirt. She was calm, composed, but deep inside, the years of tactical training were already working. She measured his stance, the twitch of his hand hovering just a little too close to his belt. She knew what came next. And then, just like that, the situation shifted from ridiculous to dangerous. Gary's hand rested firmly on his holster. He didn't pull the gun yet, but the way his thumb toyed with the strap said everything. His voice dropped lower. "Ma'am, step back. I'll ask you one last time." The neighbors gasped. Phones tilted higher, catching every second of the drama. John's face went pale. He took a step forward, panic lacing his words. "Gary, that's my daughter, don't you dare." But Gary wasn't backing down. His ego was too inflated, his pride too deep. He lived for this moment. His whole identity hinged on proving he was in charge. And right there, under the dim glow of the streetlights, he was seconds from making the worst mistake of his life. Emily didn't flinch, didn't scream. Instead, she took a slow step closer, her voice steady and commanding, the kind of voice that cuts through chaos. "Put your hand off that weapon, now." Gary narrowed his eyes. He thought he smelled fear, but he was wrong. What he didn't know was that the woman standing before him wasn't just some homeowner's daughter. She was one of the FBI's top tactical commanders. She'd faced cartel bosses, armed militia groups, and high-stakes hostage standoffs. And here she was, being treated like a trespasser by a man who couldn't even spell jurisdiction. The neighborhood held its breath. Kids whispered, dogs barked in the distance. Every second stretched longer, heavier. And that's when Gary shifted, unhooking the safety strap on his holster. The scene was seconds away from spiraling out of control. And if you think it couldn't possibly get worse, wait until you hear what happens when Emily decides to show Gary exactly who he's dealing with. Because the badge she's about to flash doesn't just outrank him, it's about to flip this entire neighborhood upside down. So what would you do if your family was threatened like this? Keep calm or snap back? Let me know below and stick around, because part 2 is where this showdown takes a turn Gary never saw coming. The cul-de-sac had gone from quiet suburbia to a live theater performance, and Gary Holt, the self-proclaimed protector of the HOA, was convinced he was the star of the show. He strutted like he had a badge of honor instead of a plastic name tag clipped to his shirt. In his mind, this wasn't just another night shift. This was his moment. Emily, standing calm and collected, didn't flinch under the glare of his flashlight. But Gary fed off the tension. He thrived on eyes watching him, and he knew the neighbors were recording. That only made him louder, more dramatic, as if he were auditioning for some reality cop show. "Ma'am," he declared, projecting his voice across the street like a stage actor, "you're not authorized to be here. This is private community property under the jurisdiction of the HOA. I'll need to see proper identification." Emily folded her arms, a faint smirk forming. "Jurisdiction of the HOA? That's a new one." From the porch, her father John's frustration boiled over. "Gary, quit this nonsense. That's my daughter, for crying out loud. She doesn't need your permission to walk into my house." But Gary ignored him. His eyes stayed locked on Emily, his tone dripping with condescension. "Sir, please step back. I'll handle this. HOA security is trained for these situations." Trained, the word nearly made Emily laugh. She knew real training. She'd been through live fire drills, hostage negotiations, tactical combat. And here was Gary, a man whose most dangerous confrontation until now had been writing up a citation for a neighbor's lawn being half an inch too tall. Still, Emily stayed silent. She wanted to see how far he'd take this charade. And Gary, oh, he didn't disappoint. He puffed out his chest, his flashlight beam trembling with the adrenaline pumping through his veins. "Ma'am, step away from the vehicle. Step away now. You're trespassing, and I've got the authority to remove you by force." The neighbors gasped. Kids whispered from the porch, wide-eyed. One boy muttered, "Is this guy serious?" while his mother hushed him, phones tilted higher, zooming in. Emily's calm voice cut through the noise. "You really think drawing a weapon over a driveway is going to end well for you?" Gary stiffened, his hand grazing the holster again. He wanted to prove something, not just to Emily, but to the whole neighborhood. He wanted them to see him as the hero who stood his ground. That's when John stepped down the porch steps, fury in his voice. "Gary, she's my daughter. If you don't back down, I swear." But before he could finish, Gary barked, "Stay back, sir. I don't want to cite you for interfering with HOA enforcement." The absurdity of it all nearly broke the tension, some neighbors chuckling under their breath. One older man whispered to his wife, "Enforcement. What's he gonna do, fine her $10?" But Gary didn't hear them. He was locked in, tunnel-visioned, convinced that this driveway had become a battlefield. And that's when Emily decided to shift the tone. She stepped closer, her face calm, her voice commanding, the kind of voice that comes from years of leading men into dangerous missions. "Put the flashlight down, step away from the holster, and listen very carefully. You're out of your depth." Her words didn't shake Gary. They fueled him. He sneered. "Lady, you don't tell me what to do. This is HOA jurisdiction, not whatever you think you are. I've got the law on my side." John groaned loudly from the porch. "The HOA is not the law, Gary." But Gary was deaf to reason. He planted his feet, making a show of adjusting his belt, and repeated louder for the cameras. "Ma'am, this is your final warning. Step back or I escalate." The street was silent except for the hum of crickets. All eyes were locked on the showdown. Emily didn't move, she didn't blink, she just let a slow smile spread across her face. "Escalate," she said softly. "You have no idea what that word really means." And then in one smooth motion, she reached into her jacket and produced something Gary wasn't ready for. Not a weapon, but a badge. The gold glinted under the flashlight beam, bold letters across the top. Federal Bureau of Investigation. The neighbors gasped. Someone's phone nearly slipped out of their hands. John let out a sigh of relief, muttering, "Finally." But Gary, he wasn't impressed. He squinted at the badge like it was a toy. "Ma'am, that don't mean squat here. HOA rules override federal badges on community grounds. That's policy." Laughter broke out from the porches. Even the kids couldn't hold it in. The sight of a wannabe cop trying to outrank the FBI with an HOA pamphlet was too much. But Emily didn't laugh. She just stared at him, unblinking, her voice dropping into the kind of calm that carries real weight. "Gary, you've got 5 seconds to holster that weapon, or you're going to learn exactly what federal escalation looks like." The tension was unbearable, the entire street frozen. The neighbors, the cameras, the whispers, all waiting to see if Gary would back down or make the biggest mistake of his life. And just as his hand twitched closer to his holster again, Emily's other hand brushed against the radio clipped to her side. She whispered into it, quiet enough for only him to hear. "Unit 3, we've got a situation." The crackle of static was the last sound before the cul-de-sac's peace shattered forever. "So tell me, if you saw your HOA guard try to stand taller than the FBI, would you laugh? Or would you run?" Think about it, because in Part 3, Gary's about to find out that the people pulling into this neighborhood aren't just visiting family. They bring an army with them. The quiet hum of the summer night was gone now. In its place, the cul-de-sac had turned into a stage for chaos. Neighbors lined the sidewalks, kids peeked from behind porch railings, and every smartphone in sight was locked on the drama unfolding. Emily stood calm in the driveway, badge gleaming under the streetlight, her steady posture daring Gary Holt, the self-styled HOA enforcer, to make his next move carefully. But Gary wasn't built for careful. He was built for stubborn pride, for doubling down even when the ground was falling away beneath him. His lips curled into a smirk, though his voice cracked just slightly as he spoke. "That badge don't scare me. You think flashing it makes you untouchable. Not here. This neighborhood don't answer to the FBI. We answer to the bylaws." The crowd murmured, laughter bubbling up. Someone whispered, "The bylaws? Is this guy for real?" But Gary didn't care. He felt cornered, and cornered men make reckless choices. His hand slid down again, this time gripping the pistol. The snap of the holster strap echoed like a gunshot in the still night. Mothers gasped. A few neighbors yanked their kids inside. But nobody stopped recording. If anything, more phones came up, capturing the madness in shaky hands. Emily's father, John, froze on the porch steps. His heart pounded against his ribs. "Gary, don't you dare!" His voice cracked with desperation. "That's my daughter." But Emily remained unnervingly calm, her eyes locked on Gary's hand. She had seen this before, too many times, twitchy men with cheap authority and fragile egos, convinced that intimidation could fill the gaps where real training should have been. She knew how fast this could spiral, and she also knew how to stop it. Her voice was sharp, cutting through the tension like a blade. "Gun down now." The authority in her tone wasn't loud, it didn't have to be. It carried weight, the kind that made even seasoned officers pause. But Gary, he mistook her calm for weakness. He thought this was his moment to win. "You don't tell me what to do," he barked, raising the pistol out of its holster now, holding it low but visible. His eyes darted to the crowd, looking for validation. "I'm protecting this neighborhood. She's a trespasser until I say otherwise." Gasps rippled through the street. The neighbors were no longer amused. This was no longer a circus. This was a powder keg. Emily didn't move, didn't blink. Her voice lowered, steady as stone. "Gary, you've just escalated into federal territory. You have 5 seconds to put that weapon away, or I'll act under authority you can't even begin to comprehend." But before Gary could respond, another voice cut in. A shrill, desperate screech from across the street. "Don't let her in." The HOA board president, a woman named Marlene, came storming out of her house in slippers and a silk robe, her hair in curlers. She waved a clipboard like it was a sword. "She's not on the approved resident list. You stop her, Gary. That's an order." The absurdity nearly broke the moment. Neighbors gawked at her, some covering their mouths to keep from laughing. But Emily didn't even glance her way. Her eyes stayed locked on Gary's trembling hands. And in that moment, Gary made the mistake of his life. He raised the pistol just high enough for everyone to see it clearly, the muzzle now pointed vaguely in Emily's direction. His face was pale, but his pride refused to let him back down. John shouted from the porch, his voice breaking, "For God's sake, Gary, that's my daughter." Emily's hand moved like lightning. Not to her weapon, she didn't need it yet. Instead, she reached into her jacket pocket and in one fluid motion snapped her badge open higher, holding it inches from his face. The gold seal glinted, bold letters screaming the truth. Federal Bureau of Investigation, Tactical Division. The crowd erupted in gasps. Marlene froze mid-step, her clipboard dropping to the pavement. Even Gary's smirk faltered for the first time. But he didn't back down. Pride, fear, ego, they mixed into something toxic. His voice wavered, but he forced the words out. "FBI or not, I'm the authority here, you don't scare me." Emily leaned in closer, her voice so calm it was terrifying. "Gary, I've commanded armed raids against men 10 times tougher than you. I've negotiated with terrorists who didn't twitch half as bad as your hand right now. So believe me when I tell you, if you don't holster that weapon, this driveway becomes a crime scene and you'll be the headline." The street went dead silent. Even the crickets seemed to stop. Gary's grip tightened on the pistol. He was shaking now, but too far gone to retreat gracefully. He had one move left, and he thought it would make him look strong. And then from Emily's jacket pocket, a soft crackle of static echoed. Her radio came to life. "Unit 3, status check, ready for go." Gary's face went white. Marlene's jaw dropped. The neighbors whispered in disbelief. Emily's lips curved into the faintest smile. She hadn't come alone. "So here's the question. What would you do if you realized the person you just pulled a gun on was backed by an entire tactical team already en route? Would you keep bluffing, or would you pray for mercy?" Stick around, because in Part 4, Gary's about to learn that HOA bylaws don't stand a chance when black SUVs roll into the street. And trust me, the way this standoff escalates will make you question just how far pride can push a man before everything breaks. The neighborhood had gone still, holding its breath as if the cul-de-sac itself understood the danger brewing. Gary Holt's hand clutched the pistol like it was the last shred of authority he had left. His knuckles were white, his voice trembling, but his pride screamed louder than common sense. Across from him, Emily didn't budge. Her FBI badge glinted under the streetlight, her posture calm, her voice steady. Years of tactical command had taught her one thing: control the field or the field controls you. And right now, she was in control, whether Gary realized it or not. The radio at her side still crackled faintly, a reminder that backup was already listening. Gary noticed it too, his eyes darting nervously toward the sound before flicking back to her. He swallowed hard but forced out a sneer. "Badge or no badge, ma'am," he spat. "This here's private property. HOA bylaws outrank federal fancy talk. You ain't got clearance here." The words hung in the air, so absurd the crowd couldn't hold it in. A ripple of laughter broke out from the porches. One neighbor muttered loud enough for everyone to hear, "This guy thinks the HOA outranks the FBI?" A teenager snorted, "Yeah, what's next? HOA gonna take on the Pentagon." Even Emily's father, John, shook his head in disbelief. He muttered under his breath, "Son, you just arrested your own career." But Gary wasn't backing down. The laughter only fueled his desperation. His pride was a balloon stretched to its limit, and every chuckle was another pinprick. He jabbed the pistol toward the ground, barking louder now, voice cracking. "Y'all think this is funny? This is protocol. She doesn't get to enter unless I say so." That was when Emily stepped forward. Slowly, calmly, every step deliberate. The kind of walk that said she was the one writing the rules now. She stopped just a few feet away, close enough for him to see the steel in her eyes. Her voice dropped low, each word sharp as a blade. "Gary, you've already crossed the line, that gun in your hand. That's a federal violation. Point it at me again, and you'll find yourself in a cage so fast you won't even have time to call your HOA lawyer." Gary's breathing grew shallow, his confidence unraveling, but he clung to it desperately. "You can't scare me, you're bluffing." Emily leaned just slightly closer, her tone quiet enough only he could hear. "You ever wonder what happens when you pull a gun on a federal tactical commander? You won't like the ending." And then, as if fate wanted to drive the point home, headlights flared at the end of the street. A pair of sleek black SUVs rolled slowly into the cul-de-sac, engines humming like thunder, tinted windows hiding the eyes inside. The neighbors gasped. Phones swung around to catch the new arrivals. Mothers grabbed their kids and pulled them closer. Even Marlene, the HOA board president who had been yelling about bylaws a moment ago, froze in her slippers. The SUVs came to a smooth stop. Doors opened in perfect unison, and out stepped agents, men and women in tactical gear, moving with the kind of precision you don't learn from a weekend security course. They didn't need to draw weapons. Their presence alone was enough. Gary's face drained of color. The pistol in his hand shook so visibly now that even the kids noticed. One whispered, "He's toast." Emily didn't move, didn't flinch. She simply tilted her head toward the agents. "Unit 3, situation contained, stand by." The lead agent nodded, eyes narrowing on Gary. He didn't say a word, he didn't have to. The weight of the standoff shifted entirely. But just when the neighborhood thought Gary would drop the act, he doubled down. Pride, foolish pride, pushed him past the point of no return. He barked, voice cracking but loud. "This is trespassing, this is MY jurisdiction, you." Before he could finish, one of the agents cut him off with a deadpan tone sharp enough to slice steel. "Sir, you've just aimed a firearm at a federal officer on U.S. soil. Jurisdiction, you're standing on a crime scene." The crowd erupted. Gasps, laughter, shouts of "Oh, snap!" filled the night. Even John couldn't help but let out a bitter chuckle. Gary blinked, stunned, but he tried one last time. "This is private property, HOA rules." The agent stepped closer, towering over him. "Sir, do you really want to argue HOA bylaws with the United States government?" Gary's mouth opened, but no words came. His hand trembled, the pistol sagging lower, his knees wobbling like the ground had given way beneath him. And Emily, she stayed perfectly still, calm as ever, eyes never leaving his. In her silence, the truth was clear. The game was over. But was it? Because just as Gary seemed ready to drop the pistol, a voice shrieked again. Marlene, still clutching her robe, stormed forward, waving her clipboard. "Don't listen to her. Arrest her. She's not on the resident list. You work for me." The street fell into stunned silence, the agents turning their eyes on Marlene as if they couldn't quite believe what they were hearing. Emily didn't even look at her. Her gaze stayed fixed on Gary. And then, with deliberate calm, she reached for her radio once more. "Unit 3, she said, her voice like steel. "Proceed to Phase 2. The static crackled, and the agents moved into formation. The neighborhood had no idea what Phase 2 meant, but they were about to find out. "So tell me, if you were standing there, would you keep recording for TikTok? Or would you bolt inside and lock the door? Because in Part 5, the tactical response rolling into this neighborhood is about to turn HOA pride into a federal nightmare. The neighborhood that once seemed so ordinary had turned into a theater of secrets, and everyone had front row seats. News spread like wildfire. An HOA guard had pulled a gun on the wrong woman, and now the truth was starting to seep out. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains, whispering over fences, wondering if their once trusted security guard was really just a hired thug for the HOA board. And while gossip rippled through the cul-de-sacs, the guard himself was packing like a caged animal, replaying the moment over and over. He still had no idea who he had threatened, only that she hadn't flinched when the weapon leveled in her face. Meanwhile, Sarah, cool as ever, was 3 steps ahead. She wasn't just an FBI tactical commander by title. She was trained to infiltrate, dismantle, and expose groups who operated above the law. And to her, this HOA smelled like one of those groups. She didn't move fast, though. No, she moved with strategy. While the guard tried to puff up his chest, she quietly reached out to contacts who owed her favors. Background checks, license plate traces. Even the HOA's financials weren't safe anymore. If there was rot in this neighborhood, she was about to dig it up. But here, where things took a darker turn, late one night, while reviewing documents under the dim light of her laptop, Sarah found something that made her sit back in her chair. This wasn't just about one hot-headed guard and a crooked HOA president. No. Buried in the HOA's expense reports were large cash withdrawals, unexplained consulting fees and security expenses that had nothing to do with maintaining gates or sidewalks. It looked more like laundering, cover-ups, payments for silence. And then, in one chilling line item, she found a payment that listed the guard by name. Sarah's lips curved into a thin, dangerous smile. The HOA wasn't paying this man to protect the neighborhood. They were paying him to intimidate residents, to enforce the board's power with threats and fear. But here's the twist that even Sarah didn't expect. While she was connecting the dots, the guard himself was growing paranoid. His phone buzzed with encrypted texts from a number he couldn't trace. Messages that said things like, "Clean it up," and worse, "She can't know." Viewers, take this in. Sarah wasn't just dealing with a power-drunk HOA. She was uncovering something bigger. And when you realize your own neighborhood's guard might be answering to people outside the fence line, would you keep quiet, or would you dig deeper like she did? Because what she did next, that's where this story takes a sharp, dangerous turn. By now, the guard wasn't sleeping. His paranoia leaked into every movement, checking his mirrors, jumping at barking dogs, even twitching when sprinklers hissed on at night. He thought he was the predator, but in truth, he had already become prey. And Sarah, she was circling him without lifting a finger. The evidence she'd collected was damning, but she wasn't ready to strike yet. No, she wanted to watch the HOA unravel from the inside. One afternoon, the board held an emergency, closed-door meeting at their pristine clubhouse, the kind of meeting where neighbors weren't allowed, but Sarah had no intention of missing it. She sat quietly in her car across the lot, sunglasses on, sipping coffee like a casual commuter. But through her tinted windows, a small parabolic mic was pointed right at that clubhouse wall. And what she heard, viewers, it was enough to make any homeowner's blood run cold. The HOA president's voice carried through first, tense and sharp. "She's digging. I told you not to pull that stunt at the gate. Now she's got eyes on all of us." Another voice, a woman's nasal dripping with disdain, chimed in. "Then get rid of her, I don't care how." And then came the guard's voice, shaky but defiant. "She's not just some soccer mom. I don't know who she is, but she's trained. I could feel it. We need backup." There it was, the crack in his armor. For the first time, fear had crept into his tone. He had finally realized what everyone watching already knew. Sarah wasn't prey. She was the storm coming to his doorstep. Sarah pressed pause on her recorder, leaned back in her seat, and let out a laugh. Not a cruel laugh, but one born of irony. These people thought they could hold power with HOA rules, late fees, and hired muscle. But they had no idea they were now targets in a federal web. But the real twist landed when she reviewed the recording again. In the background, faint but clear, a fourth voice slipped through the static. Deep, calm, calculated, a voice she recognized from her federal briefings. This HOA wasn't just corrupt, they were connected. Her jaw tightened. "No wonder they're so bold," she muttered. "They're being backed." She shut her laptop, her pulse steady, her decision already made. This wasn't just about protecting her family anymore. This was about every homeowner who had been bullied, fined, or scared into silence by groups like this. And here, where you, the viewer, should lean in. Because when Sarah made her next move, it wasn't to call the cops. She knew local law enforcement could already be compromised. She wasn't rolling the dice on small-town justice. No, she dialed into the FBI's tactical division, the same division she commanded, and requested a quiet operation. They didn't even ask why. They trusted her instincts. But here's the hook, folks. While Sarah was setting the board up for the fall, the guard made his own move. Shaken by the voices he answered to, he decided to get ahead of the chaos. That night, while the board slept soundly in their cul-de-sacs, he drove straight to Sarah's driveway and killed his headlights. He wasn't there to apologize. He wasn't there to confess. He was there to silence her before the storm broke. Now let me ask you, What would you do if the same man who once leveled a gun at your face showed up in your driveway at midnight? Stay silent? Call 911? Or would you stand tall like Sarah, already knowing he picked the wrong target twice? Because the moment he stepped onto her property, things shifted. And Part 7 will show you exactly how Sarah turned the tables in a way this guard never imagined. The night was still, the kind of stillness that makes every sound, every cricket, every shifting tree branch sound like a drumbeat. And into that silence crept the guard, moving across Sarah's driveway like a shadow with shaky hands. But he wasn't as quiet as he thought. Sarah had seen the headlights kill from the second floor. She didn't panic. She didn't even flinch. She simply set down her tea, pulled a small earpiece into place, and whispered, "He's here." 3 blocks away, a black SUV with tinted windows rumbled to life. Sarah wasn't alone tonight. She had backup in position. She wasn't just playing defense anymore. Still, she wanted to see what the guard was made of. She opened the front door before he could knock, the porch light flicking on like a spotlight in a theater. And there she stood, not in pajamas, not in fear, but in dark tactical gear, her badge glinting faintly against her chest. The guard froze, his hand still tucked behind his jacket where the cold steel rested. His eyes darted from her face to the shadowed yard around him, as if he could feel the invisible eyes watching. "Go on," Sarah said, her voice calm, almost taunting. "You came here for a reason, let's hear it." He swallowed hard. The tough guy who once barked threats at the community gates suddenly looked like a man caught trespassing in a wolf's den. "You don't understand," he stammered. "It's bigger than you, I was told." Sarah cut him off. "Told by who? The HOA president, or the voice I heard in the clubhouse? You think I don't know?" The guard blinked. That slip about a voice she shouldn't have known about hit him like a sucker punch. His mouth opened, but no words came out. She stepped closer, her tone sharpening. "You're not protecting a neighborhood, you're protecting criminals. And tonight you thought you scare me into silence. But you didn't ask yourself the right question." His eyes narrowed. "What question?" Sarah tilted her head, eyes locked on his. "What happens when the woman you pulled a gun on isn't afraid of you, because she trains the people you're supposed to be afraid of?" It hit him then, the realization. His shoulders slumped as if the weight of every wrong move finally pressed down on him. He knew she was FBI. He knew he was finished. But just as his lips parted, maybe to confess, maybe to beg, the screech of tires tore through the night. Another car, sleek and black, shot around the corner and killed its lights just short of Sarah's yard. 2 men stepped out. No HOA polos, no name tags, just dark jackets, broad frames, and movements too precise to be local muscle. The guard's face drained of color. He turned toward Sarah, voice cracking. "You don't get it, they're not here for you, they're here for me." And that's when viewers need to lean in, because everything shifted. Sarah wasn't just up against a crooked HOA anymore. Something bigger, something organized, had just entered her street. The guard stumbled back, panic flashing in his eyes. "If I talk, they'll kill me. If I don't talk, you'll bury me." Sarah didn't move. She didn't need to. Behind her, down the block, the rumble of another SUV grew louder. Reinforcements, hers, not theirs. The standoff had arrived. Now think about it. What would you do in her shoes? Stand still and watch the trap close, or move first and turn the whole game upside down? Because what Sarah did next. Let's just say Part 8 is where the hammer finally drops, and the HOA's dirty empire won't walk away untouched. Engines growled on both ends of the street. On one side, Sarah's tactical division rolled in, silent, disciplined, their dark SUVs fanning out like a net closing over prey. On the other, the mysterious men who'd arrived for the guard stiffened, realizing too late that the quiet cul-de-sac they thought they owned had just become a battleground. The guard, caught in the middle, trembled like a man realizing he'd been abandoned by both sides. His hand hovered near his jacket, but Sarah's voice cut through the night, steady and commanding. "Don't even think about it. You've already chosen your side, you just don't know it yet." The 2 men from the black car drew first, their pistols flashing under the streetlights. But before they could even line up a shot, red dots danced across their chests. Sarah's team had them zeroed in from every angle. "Drop them," Sarah ordered. The men hesitated, but then came the unmistakable click of safeties disengaging all around them. They froze. Weapons clattered onto asphalt. For the first time, the HOA's shadowy protectors weren't the ones in control. And then silence, heavy, expectant. Everyone's eyes turned to the guard. His chest heaved, sweat dripping down his temples. He looked at Sarah, then at the men who'd been ready to erase him. Finally, his voice broke. They paid me to scare people, to shut them up. I didn't know it would go this far." Sarah stepped closer, her shadow stretching over him. "You pointed a gun at my daughter. It already went that far." The guard collapsed to his knees, hands raised. "I'll talk. I'll tell you everything. Just don't let them take me." Viewers, imagine this moment. The very man who thought he was untouchable, now begging for protection from the woman he once tried to silence. Irony doesn't get sharper than that. Sarah nodded once, then start talking. And he did. Right there under the glow of porch lights and the gaze of half-awake neighbors peeking from blinds, the guard spilled everything. He named the HOA president, the board members, the payoffs, the laundering scheme that stretched far beyond mowing lawns and repainting mailboxes. He exposed ties to shell companies, political donations, even real estate fraud. Every word was recorded, every detail locked in. And Sarah's team? They didn't waste a second. Warrants were already in motion. By dawn, the HOA clubhouse wasn't a fortress anymore. It was a crime scene. Files seized, computers bagged. The so-called board loaded into black vans, their indignant protests drowned out by flashing lights. And the neighbors, they stepped out of their homes one by one, watching the empire of fines and threats crumble before their eyes. For years, they'd been told to pay up, shut up, or move out. Now they saw the truth. The HOA had been nothing more than a racket. But here's the twist, folks. Sarah didn't just dismantle the board. She rebuilt the neighborhood. She gathered the residents, handed them back the power that had been stolen, and showed them what real leadership looked like. No fear, no intimidation, just people working together again. As for the guard, he vanished into witness protection, his former bravado stripped away. He'd live out his days knowing one simple truth. He had pulled a gun on the wrong woman, and that mistake had cost him everything. And Sarah, she went back to her quiet life, her cover intact, her daughter safe. To most, she was just another neighbor walking her dog or waving at kids on bikes. But those who knew the truth, they understood the HOA never stood a chance. So viewers, let me ask you one last time. If the same thing happened on your street, would you have stayed silent, or would you have stood tall like Sarah, unmasking the corruption at your doorstep? Drop your answer in the comments, because stories like this one remind us all. Sometimes the real battles aren't fought overseas, but right here in our neighborhoods. And remember, this isn't the end of the fight. Stick around, because the next story might just make you look twice at your own HOA. You've heard this confession, now wait until you hear the next one. The truth that shatters everything you thought you knew.